Okay, so it's ready to go. I'm going to log in. And then I'll zoom up inside. Okay, so I'm going to maximize. So what you want, and if it doesn't come up, let me know, but you want to go here where the programs are. This is mine because I've been running it, but it probably where you'll find it is down in Microsoft SQL Server 2017 Tools. And if you open that, we want the SQL Server Management Studio. Is anybody not find that? Because that's what we'll be running. I don't know what that is over there. So I just while this loads, talk, I spent like 5 hours installing the full version of this weekend because it just took forever. But I included the Python and R libraries. That's part of what took the most time. All right, so this says desktop 19NF KKT. That's actually on the back there. That's what it should say. You can also maybe get by with ./SQL Express. I'm going to connect, and it should connect to the server like this. Let me see if it does. So one of the things to know, why are we connecting? This Management Studio is not SQL Server. It's just a front end to SQL Server. SQL Server runs as a process in the background. So the actual database is a process. This is a front end. There are other ways to access it than this front end. You could access it through the command line, right? Through PowerShell, things like that. So this is the graphical front end for it. It's if you ever used, anybody used MySQL, PHP admin? One person. PHP admin is sort of the same idea. Everybody got this? All right, so let's see what the problem is. So your problem is it's the wrong toolbar. It's in the wrong toolbar. Oh. So, over here. That's why I maximize it. So then, all right, we're going to nothing's there. Let's try. Anyone else? What about okay? You like working with your basketball? You can. Yeah, it's fine, whatever you like. Oh, you know what? It's wrong. Well, actually, I'm not sure it is the wrong toolbox. Did you install these?
Yep.
So why is it not good? Let's go back. Because we had the two of these, right? So let's do this one. So I want this one to power that one. And then we'll load this one. So we'll get going just a second. Why is it not having the same machine? You were on this machine when you did it, right? You were sitting here when you did it, yeah. So why is it not showing it? I think these are the same. See something real quickly. Windows 10. We have one on the desktop. I almost swore that others were in documents. But I bet it's the desktop one that's good. Closed. This one is from the desktop. This one is from documents. So the desktop should be good. There we go. And it's running already. Log in. So the beginning of this video is going to be really boring. PF SSW0 RD1. When you get in, I'll help you. It should be there now. I think it's because you have two different copies. Did you have the virtual machine hooked? You have it there? Okay. All right, so let's get going. I'll start, and I'll help a couple people if you need to get in. I know you're updating. So you can kind of watch for a minute. Sorry about that. I wish I could turn off updates. One of the problems with Windows 10 is you can't turn off updates. All right. I want to get this out of the way. So this, we did a little bit of a tour of this last time, didn't we? Yes, no? I think we did. So I'm not going to repeat all of that. And we did, I have more databases than you have. I have test 1, test 2, Vincent's. So I'm going to show you again two ways to make a database, and then I'll show you a couple of ways to make tables. And then actually you'll be pretty well, maybe I'll show you a little bit about how to enter data too. And then you'll be ready to go. So I said I'll give you today what time we have left after I show you stuff, and I'll also give you pretty much the whole class on Wednesday to build this. So you should have lots of time and not panic too much. You guys have been doing pretty well, so hopefully it'll all go smoothly. So the easiest way probably to make a database is to right-click on databases in the Object Explorer and say New Database. And I'll catch you up on these if you need. Are you in?
It's okay. Still
Okay.
processing.
So you just give the database a name. I have test 1, test 2, test 3. Let's do, so I'm going to call this Vincent's. I have a Vincent's. Should I call it Vincent's 2 or Vincent's Vinyl? Let's call it Vinyl. So I think I told you before, there's always 2 files at a minimum. There's the data file that contains all the data, all the information about the structures, everything there is to know in the database is essentially in the data file. And then there's the log file that keeps track of all your transactions, all the things that happen in the database, particularly since your last backup. So if your database fails, presumably you can restore your backups and then restore the log to get the stuff that wasn't in the backup. Couple of other little minor things that I'll mention is that the log file should never be on the same disk as the data file. Otherwise, what's the point? Because it's usually the disk failure that would cause it to be bad, right? Go away.
How did you open that?
I right-clicked. So right-click on databases, new database. I'll call it Vincent's Vinyl. Don't put a apostrophe in it. So I'm going to do add, or not add. I'm going to do OK. Don't do add. Add is if you want to add files. So there's Vincent's Vinyl. I have Vincent's from this morning and Vincent's Vinyl from now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get you started on it. But I'm going to show you a couple, 3 ways to do things. So if I open this, you will see that there are folders inside of here. There's diagrams. We're going to use the diagram in a moment. There are tables, views, external resources, synonyms, which is where you can rename things temporarily, programmability. There's all sorts of things. Mostly we're going to worry about tables, and we'll also do the database diagram. So I'm going to show you 3 ways to create tables, but I'm going to suggest using the 3rd way. All right, so the other 2 you can do if you want, but I'm just basically going to show this. So on tables, if I right-click on it and click on table, it will give me a designer. All right, where I can give, so let's do what, customer maybe first. I want a simple table that doesn't have a lot of relationships. We called it client, right? Actually. So let's call it client. I'm not going to build the whole database here. And I'm going to call it client ID because this is actually the column name. For the data type, I'm going to give it an integer data type. I'm not going to allow nulls. Let me show, I'm not going to go over every data type, but I'm going to show you the ones that I would use most often. So I'm going to actually scroll up to the top. So I would ignore big int and binary, though you can use them if you want. They really don't apply to anything we're doing. You might want to use bit. So you know what a bit value is? What it can store? Actually, that's byte. A bit actually can only store one character. 0 or 1, yeah. They use it for a Boolean in SQL Server. So 1 is true, 0 is false. All right. Weirdly, when you do the data entry, it'll say true, false. But it's actually underneath, it's just storing it as a 0 or a 1. Okay, so those bit is, yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed what you did that open file.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
So I will kill it and not save it. I right-clicked on tables, and then I said table.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Anyone else? I mean, it's perfectly good, and you're so far back, I know it's hard to see and hear. So I am going to, I'll do it again, client ID, and then the data types. And this is a part you don't worry too much in when you're doing the design, but you have to worry about when you're actually building the database. So I said int, and an integer is just a number without any decimal parts, right? Int by default is 32-bit here, which I think goes to some 13 billion. It is possible you would want the big int if you need to go beyond that. There are databases with far more than 13 billion records. But for most things, that's plenty. All right. So I'm going down to the next one. I would probably pay attention to money, maybe. Let me go up. I was scrolling from the top. Date you might want to use, right? Dates are just dates. So if you need to put a date down, that's what you would use. Date time gives you the date and the time. And you can't do one without the other. You have to have both. If you don't enter the time, it'll be just 00:00:00. If you don't enter the date, it'll be 00:00:00. So, but it wants both date and time. I wouldn't worry about date time to or date time offset. They're more worried about relation to Greenwich Mean Time. That's what the offset is. And the other is just that. The other one I might use is decimal. You can use that for money if you want. The 18-0 there means that there's like 18 total digits. The reason there's a comma is you get to say how many are on each side of the decimal point. They can't be more than 18, but you could say like 10-2, and that would mean there'd be 10 digits to the left of the decimal point and 2 to the right. So you get to say what the precision is. Some people prefer this for money. You might have noticed that there is a money data type. The thing that drives people crazy about money is that it has 4 decimal places, okay? Not 2. So if you want it to be 2, you can use decimal. Banks go out even farther than 4. I'm not actually sure of the logic of 4, because banks go farther than that, and most people, when they look at it, don't. So I don't know. We're not going to use geography or geometry or hierarchy. Image is deprecated. We're not going to put any pictures in here, but if you did want to do a database with pictures, you should use var binary instead. Image is deprecated. Int we just did, money I mentioned. You could do, so there's incar and there's invarchar, and those are what I would do for characters. Does anybody know what they, what is an incar? Anybody have an idea? It's actually not ASCII. Car is ASCII. Incar is Unicode. Yeah. An incar is fixed width, and varchar is variable width. So invarchar is Unicode variable width, and incar is fixed width. Fixed width means that no matter what the number in there where it says 50, That's the max. You can go up to 255. What it will do if it's fixed width is if you said 255, it will always stamp 255 spaces no matter how long the word is, right? It always does the same fixed width for that field. If it's varchar, if you say 255, it will shrink or expand up to 255 for that field. So the difference is processing versus disk space. It takes more processing to do varchar because you have to calculate the width of each word or each term that you're entering. Whereas, but it's much more efficient on disk space. And the fixed width is much faster in terms of processing, but wasteful of disk space. And which is more important kind of depends on you. I don't expect you to remember all these, by the way. There's like 25 data types. I use like 3 of them most of the time. In varchar max, you shouldn't use unless you're really writing something big. It allows you up to 3 gigabytes of text into a field, but you can't search it, right? You can retrieve it, but you can't search it. No record in a database, no row can be larger than 14 kilobytes. So when you have something like this where it's 3 gigabytes, what it does is it creates a pointer to where somewhere else in the data file where it stores to that file. Does that make sense? You can retrieve it, but you can't search its content because it's not actually in the data table. All there is a pointer to where it's stored it somewhere else. It'll still be in the same data file, but it won't be in the structure. I don't know how to explain that exactly, but I wouldn't worry about small date time. I wouldn't worry about. There is time though. The 7 on that is just, you can say what precision of time you want, whether you want to go to the nanosecond or the second or the minute, depending on what you put there as a number will be its precision. Does that make sense? Also, times are entered as military time. And let's see, what else do we have? I think that's all I would worry about. XML is kind of neat, but it's not really in our area. So there's lots of data types. You don't want to make everything just varchar or int. You want to make some sense of it. So let's do client. Were we going to break first and last name apart? I think we were. Client first name. What do you think that would be? In varchar? Yeah. Why did I what? Oh, I wouldn't allow nulls there. That's actually a good point. If you allow nulls, it means that it's optional. 255 is the maximum number of characters. I think I would leave the first name optional. And again, I would just do in varchar. 50 is probably enough, but a lot of times within varchars, I go to the max. That way you just, you have that much room. 255 is the maximum. That can be stored in the table, right? And I use in varchar instead of varchar. Varchar is ASCII and varchar is Unicode. So if you need to enter some non-English character, you can, but you don't have to. So I'm going to do client email. Last name I'm not going to leave, and this will make in varchar too. All right. Was there anything else we were going to do in client? Okay, so we were thinking of the phone. So this depends on what you want to do with the phone. I would be happy with INCAR 10. That means you'd have all the digits, but with no parentheses or dashes. If you want the parentheses or dashes, you would need to make it out more. I don't enter these as numbers because you're never going to add, subtract, or multiply their phone. And sometimes phones have characters that are not, like, do any area codes start with 0? There are some zip codes that start with 0. If you did integer, those zeros drop away, right? So it just makes more sense to treat them as a character. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to leave that there. Last thing I'm going to do, 2 things. I'm going to right-click on client, and I'm going to set the primary key. So I did on client ID, I just right-clicked on that and set the primary key. I'm going to show you this, but it's confusing, so don't panic if it doesn't follow. But if you want this to be auto-numbered, down here, way off my screen, there are properties. And there's a identity specification. If you click that little arrow, turn it downward, it gives you some things. And if one of them says is identity, if I change that way over here, I can change it to yes. And it will change these to yes, identity increment 1 and identity seed 1. What identity is what they call an auto number in SQL Server. When we get to MySQL, they call it an auto number. But the 1 here means start counting at 1 and add by 1. Add 1 each time, right? So it's going to increment by 1 and start at 1. If you wanted to start at 1,000, you could just write 1,000 here and it would start at 1,000. And you can count by whatever you want to. So if you want to count by tens, you could do that. I'm just going to leave that. This is not necessary, particularly for as small a database as we're going to do. I mean, I'm assuming 5 to 10 records a table. You could just manually type in the numbers for the keys if you want. So I'm going to do save. Creates a dialog box here. I'm going to call this table client. I'm going to do OK. And if we open up tables over here, it should have client. And I'm going to open up the thing here so you can see the columns. And it also shows the key field. That's all really useful sometimes when we do queries and stuff, when you want to remember what the column names are. You can also, it doesn't show it right here, but if I expand this over a little bit, you can see what the data types are too.
How do you save that?
What I did to save it is I clicked the little disk. But you can also do file save.
Do you add foreign keys in these tables?
You can. I'm going to show you a couple other ways. The easiest way to do foreign keys is to drag them in the designer.
What's the difference of nvarchar and varchar?
What?
Difference of
nvarchar is Unicode. You guys know what Unicode is? No? So do you guys know what ASCII is? So ASCII, you know that letters are stored as numbers, right? Computers don't know what A is. They just know there's a number in its processor that corresponds with a set of dots that form a letter like this. Every letter in it is a number in the, associated in the keyboard. ASCII is essentially this. ASCII is the English alphabet and a few other characters. Okay. There are 255 characters because that's how many you can store in a byte. All right. However, Unicode is every language on Earth, pretty much, including some languages that don't actually exist. There is, in Unicode, you can find Klingon and Elvish, among others. So Unicode is a huge set. You can write Cyrillic, you can write Greek, you can write Korean, you can write whatever language you want. It's a stepped setup. So the first 255 characters, I was looking for a pin, are ASCII, and they're 1 byte. They're stored in 1 byte. Then you go out to, I don't know if it goes to 10 bits or 16 bits. I don't know if it goes out to 5 at a time or not. But it steps out to the next level, and then you have however many, I think it's like 32,000 places for characters there. And then it steps out again, another byte. And it basically, so as you go, it just keeps, the set gets bigger for defining each character. But the fact of it is it has enough room for every language on Earth and more. There's plenty of spaces. Yeah.
You have to worry about Unicode versions if you're doing that? Or?
Not too much. They're pretty consistent. They're pretty well built into every modern computer. I don't know if every modern computer has the entire code. There's UTF-8, which is smaller, but the definitions are all still the same. It's just a smaller subset of those definitions. And I think most of the Unicode versions are just subsets of the big Unicode specification. I use nvarchar because, again, the computer has, you're not losing anything if you type English. It's the same size as if it would be ASCII. But it allows you, if you want, to enter a non-English character if you need. Okay, so we've saved that. It's done. I'm going to close that. That's one way to make a table. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't. You had a little selector on his identity, and I can't get that.
So is there a little, hit the little down thing?
Yeah, I've done that. Identity specification. His identity I can click on, but there's no record change. Let's see. We had a little selector in here. Yeah, so this one, but I think it's because, oh, that's it. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, that's because we did. Yeah. Actually, the quickest way to do this is dot backslash. Other way. And then SQL Express. And then do connect. You're like this. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So maybe just
yeah.
put this.
Workshop.
Did you give it a name? Whatever it is. That's a cancel.
Email also same.
So if your table doesn't show up, you may have to refresh. Stuff you do in the designers and SQL window don't necessarily appear over here if you don't refresh. And the top level refresh usually doesn't work. You have to refresh at the level that you're working with. Did you get in and doing okay? Okay. All right, so here's a second way to make a table. So I'm doing a new query. This is the SQL way. This is the way that I would actually do it, but I'm not advising you to do it because I do assume you don't know SQL. But I'm going to show you that anyway. We're going to do a real simple table. So first of all, I need to, it's really important that you kind of you are in the right database. I actually am, but I'm going to do that. And if I run that, it says that it completed successfully. And if you, I'm in Vincent's final over there. You could obviously also do it with the drop down. All right, so I'm going to create a table. I'm going to create table. Let's just do artist. Going to do a parentheses and another parentheses. And then I'm going to say artist ID. It's going to be an integer. Identity, remember that's the auto number, 1, 1, and it's a primary key. What else did we have in artist? Artist name, varchar. Was there anything else in artist? That was it, pretty much.
How did you get that open?
So I hit new query up here.
No.
Couple of little side notes about this. In SQL Server, you don't have to use semicolons, but in any other environment, it would look like that. You'd have to use semicolons in MySQL or Oracle or pretty much any other environment. It might not be a bad idea to use them in SQL Server. It ignores them. It doesn't do anything with them one way or another. It's not case sensitive. It's a nice thing. Most languages are case sensitive. SQL is not. This is how you create a table. And you could, the way I would create this database is I would just create the script. To me, it's faster, much more efficient, works really well. This is how you could do it at a command line too. That being said, you haven't had much SQL yet. And it would be a bit of a challenge probably if you haven't done it before. So I'm not advising doing it this way. And I haven't shown you how to make foreign keys, which are a little bit more complicated. But primary key is pretty easy. Right? So I'm going to just highlight that, execute. Again, it says command completed successfully. The table doesn't show up here immediately. I really have to go up to tables, right click, refresh, and then you'll see that there's an artist. And if I look at the columns, it's got the artist and the artist name. So that's another way to create tables, is with the SQL. Just as a side, everything that the GUI does, every single thing you do in the GUI is translated into SQL underneath. Everything you can do in a database, you can do with SQL. So literally everything in the GUI can be done with SQL. Just to let you know.
How to get this page?
So you click on New Query. There's a button right there, New Query. We will do some SQL. That's probably the thing that we will do on, I would guess Monday, because I'm going to give you Wednesday to create the database. And add some data, maybe. I'll give you a second if you want to type that in, although it's, again, it's just showing you a way to do it. You don't have to do it this way at all.
Once that's created, we can open it up in the other and add field.
You could if you wanted. If you want to add fields, so there's a couple ways. If you do it in SQL, the way you do it is alter table, and then you add column. But yes, you can always, any of these times, anytime you can go to design, and you're back in the designer. So what I did is I right-clicked on artist, and I went to design. For those Mac users, it's hard to get used to. Almost everything is a right-click. And a lot of the right-click menus are not available up above. something Microsoft does for good or ill.
I think the table saving, you send them a top file, that actually works for them. How to get it.
Yeah. There's a lot of, as I said, the top level menus, I don't use them a lot because they don't tend to apply to every what I want necessarily. There are some. I mean, there are things up there I do. All right. So I'm going to show you the third way, and this is the way I suggest you build your database. And a couple of you are going to have problems on this, the ones that I just brought back the database. So I'll come around and help you with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the database diagrams, and I'm going to say a new database diagram. This is perfectly normal. This happens every single time you make a new diagram, and you just want to say yes. Yes, I do want the elements that I need to create a diagram. So you say yes. And it shows our two fields. I'm just going to add them. And then I'll close this. And so I have the two things in the diagram. A couple of you are going to fail. Did anybody's failures? Yeah, you should fail. And so for you, what you need to do, right click on this properties. Just type estimate. You can do other to system administrator. Now you should do it. Anyone else's fail? Yeah. No, identity is auto number. It means start at one company. How do we do that?
I saved all those commands that we did.
So refresh that page. They were there. They just don't show up. The diagram. All right. So right click on the database diagram. And you do this. Here's just one of them. Say yes. You guys are okay?
So, I have to save this, so.
No, you just run it. Did you run it? To run the SQL, yeah, just do execute. And then if you refresh, you'll see that it's over there. Anyone else? So to run the SQL in the other one, I'm not sure I was very clear about that. You have to hit this little triangle where it says execute. And if you select something, it'll only run that statement. So if you have multiple statements, you can select one and it'll only run the one that's selected. For you, you just need to close that dialog box. So where it says, there you go. All right, we're mostly here. What happened? Oh. That's like there is one with SQL in there. With the public folders, but it has a couple of errors.
SRV 12 not working.
It is. It's actually on the machine. Oh, but what you're doing is fine. All right. Yeah. So just to add and then. Yeah. Yeah. So it won't work unless you're in the, you're selected here. Now it should work. Well, it has the identity, yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine.
but it's making all noise for me. It's different from yours.
Well, you can choose, you can uncheck them when you want them to be required.
So my other is keyword. This one is not working.
What did you name it? That's because it's Vincent Final. Okay, so let's just do. There you go.
Okay, change the name. Okay, change this one.
You're okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Good.
Change the name.
This is a 200. All right, so what I want to do in this designer, so this is the designer, this is how I would suggest making the database. So I'm going to make album. So I'm going to do new table. And the way I got that is I just right clicked into the white space, wherever, okay? And I'm going to name it album. And I'm going to do okay. And it will give me inside the designer, it basically gives me that same table designer. So I could do album ID. And data type is probably int. All right, I don't want to allow nulls. If I go over, so I'm zoomed, so it's a little bit hard, but if you go way over here, these are the same properties that were down below before. And if you wanted to make it an identity, which again is not that important for this, but just to show, you could go to where it says no and turn it to yes if you want. So you can set the properties. I can also, like before, right click and set the primary key. So I'm going to do album ID. So we did album ID, album title. And I'll probably do in varchar. And I'll probably do 255. That way I can do a fairly long title. Not nullable. What else did we have in album? Anything? I'll show you where the PDF is that I did after we're done here so you can copy from it if you need. Was it? That was it? Okay, so let's, don't even have to save this. Now I can right click on this if I want. In the blue, across the top. And there are different views. This is the standard view, the one that shows the data types. But if you want, you can reduce it to just column names, right? Any one of these. If I right click and do table view standard, it gives me the whole look. Or if you want it just to be columns, you can do that. You can also just show the key fields. If all you're showing is relationships, sometimes that's easier. All right, so between album and artist, we had what? Anybody? What? Album, artist, a linking table, right? Because there are many artists, can have, one artist can have many albums, one album can have many artists. So I'm going to make another new table, and I'll call it album artist, or artist album, whichever way you want to go. And it'll have the album ID, which will be an int. And it will have the artist ID, which will also be an int. I will not, will take away nulls. And I'm going to, you guys don't have to do this, but what I'm going to make it a composite key. So the way I do that is I click, and it has to be in this edge here. I click there, I hold the control key down, and I click there. All right, and then I can right click and do set primary key, and it makes it a composite key. The other alternative is to make an album artist ID if you want. Anybody know what the asterisks mean?
Not saved yet?
Yep, that's right. So I'm going to put this into column names. I'm going to put this in between, although it doesn't have to, but it's just for the diagram. I'm going to show you how to do the relations in the diagram. You guys ready for that?
How do you make it as a composite key?
So click there and then hold the control key down. Just the control key, and then click on the other one. Okay, so hold the control. So you hold it down while you click, and then right click, and then do keys, that primary key. So the trick is to the control key and keep it down while you click on the other one. All right, so I am going to grab the key by artist, and I'm going to drag it down to the artist ID, and I'm going to let go. This is important in that you look at this and it says artist is the primary key table, artist ID, foreign key table, album artist, artist ID. It's really important to make sure you got the right field. They're both integers. It's perfectly happy to link with album ID. But if you do, it won't work when you try to enter data. So it's really important to make sure that those things are the right fields in the right tables. There's a second level here with a lot of defaults that you can change about the relationship. Generally, I'm not going to go over them. I'll mention real quickly that you can set an update rule or a delete rule. Yeah.
Yeah, again, I missed this. How did you make that connection?
All right, so I just killed it, so I'll do it again. So you grab the key,
Okay.
and you drag to the other. So I'm in artist, so I want to drag to artist ID. When I'm right over artist ID, I let go. Make sure everything is okay. Do okay. And actually, you just want to do okay again. And it gives you this relationship. The key is the one side, and this, which looks like a chain link, but it's supposed to be an infinity sign. You know, one to many, one to infinity. So one artist has many there. And then I can do the same for the album side. So I'm going to grab the key. It only works if you grab the key. And unlike Visio, you don't want to just hook it to the box. You actually do want to drag it over the field before you let go. So here it has album ID. That's correct. Foreign key, album artist, album ID. If they're backwards or if it's the wrong field, then things will be screwed up when you try to enter data. Want me to do it again?
Well, no, I was just trying to figure out if there was, you said two different things.
No, I mean,
The bottom album IDs will match on both sides.
they should usually. If you're using my naming convention where you always name your foreign keys the same as your primary keys, then they should match. The fields should match. And in this one, as I said, there's lots of options that you could set, but for the most part, I would just say okay. And then we have that relationship, right? At some point, I'll show you how to do this in SQL. Writing the foreign key relationship is a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to hit that little disk, and it will save the diagram. It's going to give it a default name of diagram 0. You can rename it, but I'm going to leave it as diagram 0. It asks if I want to save these changes. I'm going to say yes. And then when I go over here to tables, so it has client. It doesn't have all my tables, so I need to right-click and refresh.
F5 works.
Yeah, did it refresh it? That's good to know. So I have all of those, and if I look at album artist, when I open that, it has the columns, and it also, if you look under the keys, it has the primary key and the 2 foreign keys. So to me, the easiest way to do this is to take your diagram and kind of reproduce it in this designer, because it creates the database for you when you save. And I'll show you that in a moment. The goal today would be to get it designed. I think there is an element of it, or not today. What time is it? It's 3? No, it's 2. That clock is so far off, I have no. It's 2 hours, it's 2. So we got a little while yet. Yeah.
So when it says save, the phone tables will be changed. It's lumping both created and changed tables.
Yes, yes. Well, there are some changes in the relationships, right?
Right. So I mean, it's not, if I had 2 tables and I added 2 tables and I saved 3 of them, that's not weird.
It's not weird now. Because if something's already saved, it's still there. Yeah. You may run into some errors. Like if I were to make a change on some of these, don't necessarily do this, but I'm going to take the phone. Let's go back to the standard view. Don't do this. I just want to show you. And I'm going to change it to, I'm going to change it to var, to just car, I guess. I want to change it to something slightly incompatible. When I click on that, and it's only got to save that, I'm going to say yes. Oh, I already changed it, so it's not giving me an error.
Why don't you say or
The only reason I did that was to get it to throw an error, but I realized I already canceled that possibility in the last class. Let me just show you. I'll do it as in varchar again. So in car. So when I go to, I'm going to go to Tools, Options. I'm going to go to Designers. And I wanted to show you, because a lot of you are going to run into this when you work on things. By default, this is checked. It says prevent saving changes that require table recreation. Changing a data type requires that they drop the table and recreate it. The reason why it's checked is that if you have data in there, you could lose it. Because underneath it, when you make that change, it actually drops the table, makes a new table. So you could lose data. So by default, it doesn't allow you to do that. But when you're designing it, there's a lot of times when you're going to need to make a change. You'll realize that you have the wrong data type, or you want to rename something or something. So it's easier if you go to Tools, Options, Designers, just uncheck that box, and it will let you make those changes. I'm sure I'll have to come around and help you with that at different times if you don't, but I just thought I'd show that. So there's only one last thing I want to show, just in case you get there. But as I said, I'm going to give you, so you guys are going to have more time than the other class, because you'll have about an hour now and next class. But just quite a bit of time to do it. I'm going to go back to column names. I will save again. This time it'll let me. I mean, it would let me anyway. If you want to add data to a thing, so I'm just going to right click on album. If you go to edit top 200 rows, you can enter an album. Um, I'm trying to think of the name of an album. I have hundreds of thousands of them. Why can't I remember? Can't think of one name that isn't the Beatles.
Dark Side of the Moon.
Okay, Dark Side of the Moon. I had a roommate once that listened to it on repeat forever. I may never listen to it again, which is sort of sad because it's a good album. So I do Dark Side of the Moon there. When I click down to the next, because it's auto numbering, you put the number in and I just do that. A couple of things about entering data is you have to enter the primary key side before you can enter the foreign key side. And that can be a bit of a pain to figure out. There are some tables like inventory that have a lot of foreign keys. So you can't enter anything into inventory until you have all those other tables set up. When you do, if you get to the point of entering data, which I'm not expecting today, but if you do, you can just make it up, right? Don't put more. It's easy to get carried away. You don't have to put a lot of data in it. We just want enough data that when we do some SQL queries, we can test it. 5 or 6 records is probably enough in any one table.
How did you do that?
So again, what I did to do this, I'll just close this one. You right click on a table and you say edit top 200 rows. Later I'll show you how to do inserts in SQL, which does the same thing, right? You may get, I don't know, I didn't see this. So sometimes it actually, I think they've changed the interface. There used to be a red mark there, red check mark. That just meant that it wasn't saved yet. It saves row by row.
The exclamation mark,
Yeah,
some saving in it, roll out.
yeah. Well, you don't have to save it. The way you save is to go to the next row. So it's not saved yet, there's that row, but as soon as I press enter and go to the next row, it is saved. It writes it to disk row by row. Right. They don't want you to have to, type in 1,000 records and then suddenly have the computer fail and lose them all. So it saves them row by row, but it isn't saved until you exit the row. Does that make sense? Until you exit the row to the next row. All right. I think that's all I want to show you. You guys have probably lots of questions. But one other thing I do want to show you. So I'm going to minimize this. Just the diagram. So one of the things I want to do, if I can find it, is my zoom outside. I'm looking for the zoom. I think it's out here. All right. Okay, so I was just going to Canvas. All right. So where is the rest of the picture? interesting. It's odd that the background picture didn't come up. So we are the 3196. Okay, so I'm going to go to modules. And in this one, there's Vince's VESDX. That is the Visio program one. It actually has some weirdnesses about it. It looks like a lot of my relationships got duplicated, so it's kind of a mess. This is a PDF I did where I tried to clean it up, and it might be easier to look at for just to follow. So I'm going to maximize it. And so this is the PDF of what we had done in class, pretty much. You are not obligated to follow this exactly. I know some of you have somewhat different structures. But it's there to follow if you need it. Also, if you haven't turned in your revised ERD, I will accept my own PDF when they're not blue. But it's there if you need it to follow. So the goal in today and Wednesday is to build actually build in SQL Server a database that has all these tables and fields and start adding data. And what I would like when you're done to turn in, and again, I don't expect you to finish today, is basically, so where's my diagram? Basically, like a screenshot of the diagram inside of this. There's no way to export it, which is a pain. So just basically a screenshot. Do you guys know the snipping tool? That's actually a really good tool for this. I can zoom up again, I guess. That zooms it in there. I need Control+ here. So if you go down here and just say snipping tool, the nice thing about the snipping tool is, assuming it comes up here soon, there it is. You can just click on new, and you can just draw a box around the diagram, and you don't have to do the whole screen. And you can save it as a JPEG or PNG, or you can just paste it if you're using like a Google Doc. You can copy it and then paste it. So there's lots of things you can do with it. It's a neat tool. It's just called snipping tool. But you could take just a screenshot of the middle part here with just get that part. That'll tell me that you've created the database, and then when the data we can test when we'll do a little bit of SQL. So I'm going to give you the next 40 minutes to work on this, and I will also give you all of Wednesday. Okay. So you guys are a little ahead of the other class. This will give them a chance to catch up. Yeah. I'll come around. Be there in a second. Yeah, you want to, especially drop it. Should. I don't know where you're driving. And then just like go in, kind of like drop it. Yeah, so what I did, I put here and drag to the other. How am I do that? Those are the only relationships. Yeah.
I have a question like for artists we have wrote query and for rest of the album artist and album we just created one table.
Right, we
So
started it basically. You can use the same database.
what I'm asking is why we write the query for this and
I was just showing you different ways you could do it.
or any of
You can use any of the ways that you want. I don't expect you to do this unless you've done it before.
okay.
But I was just showing you different ways you could create the table.
Oh.
I would probably use the diagram
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's easy.
Yeah.
So you have to basically use there's nothing in the database.
Original design, which had a macro, every artist, every album from this artist.
You could, but not
Or you just have a system where you put the screen down, bring in a request, you just plug this in the phone button, plug it all field, and then just go to the album itself.
right, but it's still a software. Yeah, well, they want here to do it. It's sort of in the software. I mean, you could do the exact same kind of fun and do it. If they wanted artists who could just
Right, and I'm just saying if you make them only track requests by album, you just put multiple requests.
so
But now you have to have this either or.
yeah, and it's fine if you want to. I just,
Zero is acceptable.
yeah, zero is about it.
But you still put that as required.
Right, it has to be, yeah, I mean, there is like
can show you how to do that. We can do it with all. We can do parts of it.
And they don't have to. So. Right. So you just like, they don't have to be, it isn't gonna mark it as a calendar. So that might be one of the, maybe SQL servers won't be able to mark it. So. Let's see. I would probably choose like decimal. And then maybe do so you don't want to like 18, put a 2 in because the actual percent, if you want to do a percent, it works quite good. Two additions. Yes. Or, yes, either allow penalties or default. Well, that too. Yeah, that's good. It doesn't mind. I'm going to turn off the overhead. Guys look like you're doing pretty good overall. Okay. I could look at it. Yeah,
Is there any way to change the order?
What?
Is there any way to change the order of what you type there? That brings something below.
I think you can move them around, although it doesn't actually, the order of the fields doesn't matter a whole lot.
So,
All right, thanks. So you could do money, or you could do this. Money.
just drag it like this. Just drag, yeah. So, like this. So you can check primary key. So just drag.
We only need to do that. That actually is. Yes. Yeah. So there isn't any. So let me, I guess I'll turn on the overhead for just a minute to show you what you could do if you want to take this home. In general, it's not easy.
So one is like
You have to detach the files, and then you can put them onto a thumb drive or something, and you could take them home, and then you'd have to load them into SQL Server again with an attach. I'm not sure if I'd worry too much about doing that, but I'll show you how when that comes up a little brighter. So one of the things is you have to have everything closed that relates to that database.
this option.
So just to show you, if you go to the file manager, the files are on this PC, wherever that is, right here, local disk C, program files, Microsoft SQL Server, SQL Express, MSQL, data, and you continue even though you don't have permission. Okay, this is where all the databases are. You need to, so if I were to do Vince's Vinyl and Vince's Vinyl log, You have to take them both. Right now, it says copy, but if I try to do that and try to paste it, it's going to tell me that I can't somewhere. There it is. You can't move them. So the only way to move them, let's go back to here, is you have to right click on this and you have to say tasks detach. And I think the video is still running, so there's a long dead spot in the middle here. Don't check anything there. Do OK. It may fail. It's going to say I still have connections to it, I think. Because it usually doesn't take that long. So I probably have to restart that. Let's just do this other Vincent's. I'm going to do tasks, detach. I'm going to do OK. See, that's instantaneous. There's no connections in it. Now I can go to that file folder and I can copy them. And if I go outside the what do I want to do? This is hard to do in Zoom. So I just want to paste. And now they'll paste just fine. You could take them in. A couple of things about them if you take them home. They will not run from the desktop. They will not run from my documents. They will not run from any profile-specific folder. Does that mean anything? Yeah. It has to be on a root level folder. You can put them back in data, or you can put them on any C-level folder, but it has to be a root level folder. All right, so those are copies there. Now, when you go back, so I'm going to go up here. Detached database was still open, so let's. All right, this is the one that failed. All right, notice that Vincent's isn't here anymore. Right, when you detach it, it's removed from the server. So what you need to do to, when you take it, you need to attach it. You need to add, and you need to find your files. So there's the Vincent's. Do OK. It has the data and the log. I'll just say OK. And now it's back again. So you have to detach it, get the files, and then reattach it. It's a bit of a pain. The thing to know about database files is that they're not really meant to be moved. But you can, and these are small enough to move. So you don't have to do this. It's just if you really wanted to work at home. Does that make sense?
So we are doing this.
So if you want to, again, it won't work like with you on Vincent's right now. It won't work. You won't be able to detach it because you have files, you have windows open that are talking to it. But so you might have to do it. You might have to close out of the Management Studio and come back in to break all the connections to it. And then just to right-click, tasks, detach. Then you can go get the files, and then I wouldn't move them. I would just copy them. And then you can, when you go to the other database where you want them, you can attach them and bring them back. What? You can copy them and put them on another machine that has SQL Server and then attach. A couple other caveats. This is 2017, I think. If you have 2015 or 16, it may not attach. It'll always, you can always attach an earlier form pretty much, but you can't attach one that's newer than your version. Does that make sense? So this file was created in SQL Server 2017. So an earlier version probably won't read it. Did you get your, well, I'll come around. And again, the folder where the files are is program files, C program files, Microsoft SQL Server, MSSQL 13.SQL Express / MSQL / data. It's a long path. Somewhere I have a blog entry on how to do this. I'll see if I can locate it and post it, the link. And I realize I should shut off the video because there have been lots of dead spots in it.